Clemson's offense and the Garrett Riley decision. We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Clemson.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Tiger fans? Morgan Thomas here, Clemson fan, Clemson grad, host and producer of Locked On Clemson, part-time host and producer over on 105.5 FM The Roar. Thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen of the day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the #1 sports podcast network. Thank you so much to all the everydayers out there. Big salute out there to you for hanging with us Monday through Friday every single week for exclusive Clemson content. And there's about 61% of you who are not yet subscribed or following. So what are you waiting for? Maybe you're waiting to listen to this show. Hopefully you'll listen to the end of the show and hit that follow and subscribe button so you never miss another episode. Speaking of this episode, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Welcome into today's show. We have 3 different topics, as you know how we do it here on Locked On. We're going to finish up the show with some national chaos news, talking about why Clemson still has some of the high ground, according to my thoughts, and when you compare them to other national powerhouses out there. Clemson also still continuing their recruiting momentum, even through to 2027. But first, let's talk about Clemson's offense and that Garrett Riley decision. What comes next? Because you have some outlets like the Clemson Insider saying that he's gone, he's out of here. Their sources are, that's it. That's what's going to happen. Then you have TigerNet coming out and saying, we don't know. He's still part of the staff. You have other places that are behind paywalls that I won't tell you about, but, they have their own opinion out there. So what is my opinion? Well, let's start with that topic. Clemson's offense. The season is over, at least the regular season, and we need to talk clearly about what went right, what went wrong, and what does need to happen for this offense moving forward. And here is my stance. I actually want to see Garrett Riley. I know you're probably thinking I'm a lunatic here, but I want to see Garrett Riley without Cade Klubnik. I do believe a lot of what held this offensive back, not only the lack of trust and any sort of run blocking until they worked that out a little bit better towards the end of the season, but a lack of trust in the quarterback position was detrimental in many scenarios this season. And so as you go back and look, when you saw 2025, if you were at those games, you could see there were a lot of opportunities there that number 2 just could not see. Now, Cade has talent, but when the lights were brightest, when the game was on the line, when he needed to make a play, could you count on him or not? It seemed as if more often than not, he would tighten up. When you need to be able to trust a quarterback, Clemson just couldn't do that in 2025. In those big situations, he simply didn't give the fan base much confidence. And if he didn't get the fan base much confidence, how do you think he gave any confidence to the coaching staff that was seeing him all throughout the week? You saw it on third downs. Sometimes he just wouldn't make the right play. Sometimes he would stare down the very first decision. Sometimes he would not even look at anybody else. And sometimes, well, majority of the times, he would throw it short of the first down marker. Those are things that, while I did hope that Garrett Riley would coach out of him, obviously was much harder than we thought. You saw it in the red zone, decision-making. More often than not, Cade's just not a red zone killer. He's not going to cut your throat in the red zone. He really seemed like he would rather throw it short almost every single play. You saw it in his pocket awareness where, he abandoned the pocket a ton. I will say a lot of that had to do with the offensive line not being very good. But There were times where he had opportunities and he felt footsteps or heard footsteps or refused to step up in the pocket until like later on in the season. I think the South Carolina game was probably his best game where he actually stepped up into the pocket. Clemson needs reliability at quarterback. They need composure at quarterback. They need a quarterback who can elevate the offense, not only elevate the offense, but really leak out that confidence into the defense as well. And that did not happen in 2025. And it is against what I said. At the beginning of the season, I did not say Cade would be doing any of these things. I said all he needed to be was 10% better and he could be a Heisman candidate. 10% better to Cade Klubnik would have been 40-something touchdowns, over 4,000 yards passing, and he took a huge step back from 10% better. So for people who are saying Garrett Riley was all the problem, I don't necessarily disagree with you in many situations, in many angles. I think that's just as easy a narrative to push. But I do want to see what he looks like with a different quarterback, a fresh start, someone that can possibly handle the pressure, the structure, the timing, the rhythm, keep the team going, and plays more aggressive than Cade Klubnik played. Cade Klubnik is the guy that, is the teacher's pet that's never going to get caught, in the hallway when you're not supposed to be. He's not going to push any of the boundaries at all. And sometimes you need that. You need someone who has that instinct to push it a little bit. Well, you need someone who can just blatantly say, "Hey, this is a crap play call. I'm going to do my thing, and I'm going to turn this bad play into a good play." And big time is you don't need someone who panics. You need someone who does not panic and can have the ability to stay in the pocket under pressure instead of shrinking down in the last, tight parts of the game or the last few minutes of the game. As I said, these things that I'm saying aren't saying that Cade is a bad quarterback, but he's just has a lot of limitations that can negatively impact what kind of play calls that you can call as an offensive coordinator. When you step back and you look at Clemson's numbers this year, it seems as if, Clemson did move the ball well. They were able to get 400 more yards a game. It's not that the offense production is broken by any means. Clemson struggled to finish drives, to me, because their quarterback play was unreliable in key moments. The run game was also inconsistent. So I'm not going to beat up Cade altogether in this one segment because the run game was inconsistent, not only because of the offensive line, but also because of Garrett Riley. If he had any sign that he was going to be playing from behind, he forgot about the run game. And you can't do that. We saw that against South Carolina. If you maintain a balance on your team, Clemson played better. Clemson finished 99th nationally in rushing, and that doesn't have anything to do with Cade Klubnik. You've got to be able to keep the defense honest with a run game that is something, some sort of run game. And I got to say that would be the part where I'd really be worried about Garrett Riley. As Clemson goes into 2026 with a different quarterback, who is that quarterback going to be? Is that going to be somebody that you can trust, that you believe can make plays? I think we're going to learn a lot about what Dabo Swinney really believes in this offseason. He's got to take a step back and stop believing in guys that, as I mentioned this season earlier, if it looks like a duck, acts like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. And you have to make better decisions earlier on in the offseason to say, this guy's a duck. I don't want a duck playing quarterback. I need something else. I can't spend senior year waiting for someone to change. At the same time, Clemson does need an identity. I mean, Garrett Riley, what was his identity most of this season? It wasn't establishing the run. It wasn't high tempo. It wasn't, in a lot of ways, matchups. Clemson and Garrett Riley's guard tackle pulls and counters and stuff like that actually hurt because the offensive line couldn't run the plays that he wanted, couldn't run what he needed or what he was asking for them. The offseason is a chance to reset, either with Riley, with new talent, or someone else. But one thing you can't do is go into 2026 with another like spaghetti on the wall offensive identity. You've got to know what you want to do, and you got to go out there and execute that at a high level. And you can't just hope by next September that it's going to be figured out when the game's on the line. That's important. Segment 2, coming up next, we're going to shift to something that connects to this identity, and that is the future of Clemson offense with some of these recruiting commitments that Clemson has gotten this week. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, when a receiver gets hot, when a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. I'm looking at anytime touchdown scorer right now, Travis Etienne plus 105. That might be one that I want to take a look at during the game as well. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Recruiting momentum and turning local fans into a little bit more of the believers. And I know you're not going to like me when I say this, but Clemson landed someone from D.W. Daniel High School. Before we get into that, though, I wanted to let you know that thank you so much again for making Locked On Clemson your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. I tell you all the time that Locked On is really awesome because of all the different teams that we have out there represented. You can even spy on other teams, or maybe even if you have an NFL or MLB team, there's out there as well. I listen to the Braves podcast all the time. But Clemson added a commitment from Daniel High School wide receiver Trey Wembley. And before we can even talk about his abilities, I do want to talk about what you're probably saying in the comments already. Clemson fans don't really get that excited about Daniel High School recruits. It is kind of weird, though. And it maybe it's because we're jaded because we've taken so many of them. But if you look at the ones that Clemson has taken over the history, a lot of them have been monster gets for Clemson in the recruiting trail and on Saturdays. So when a 4-star shows up from Texas or Georgia, people love it. They're drooling. It's all about those guys that have never even heard of Clemson Boulevard. But when a kid from Daniel commits, some of the fan base says, no big deal. But let's clear things up. Trey Wembley can play. If you've seen him any this year on Fridays, he's explosive. He's dangerous in space. He's the kind of athlete that can take a screen, make one defender miss, and he's gone for 60 yards. And Clemson continues to go after guys who are big-time playmakers at the wide receiver position. And Tyler Grisham is the guy that's leading the way for those things. Right now, he's the best commitment for 2027 in the recruiting class. Now, I know it's early, but these are the types of guys that are all in for Clemson. They're not going to be worried about having to, meet their needs and just appease every little thing about them. You're not going to be worried about these guys leaving either. These are the type of guys like Wembley that are all in with Clemson and want to be a part of rebuilding the program back to greatness. And when I say rebuilding, I'm literally talking about an 8-win season or 7-win season back to a 10-plus win season. So I'm not trying to give the idea that they're rebuilding from nothing. But, Wembley is the type of guy who doesn't need a perfect quarterback to change a game. He can turn simple plays into big-time gains. And that's exactly the type of player that you're looking for in Clemson, that you need to continue to reload at. And it makes the identity easier when you have a guy like that. I mean, think about when Antonio Williams wasn't on the field. It makes it easier when he's on the field. Think about now, later on the season, when Bryant Wesco wasn't on the field. It was so much easier when he was on the field. Playmakers make the offensive coordinator and the identity easier. It makes matchups easier, and it makes getting yards easier, yards after the catch easier. A threat that forces the defense and stretches them, not just vertically, but horizontally across the field. If you watch Clemson the past few years, you know that they've been really kind of building out this wide receiver group and really having a ton of success so far. But you've got to continue to, as I said with the National Signing Day show, find players that will reload after the other guys are gone, but also even replace a lot of the guys that are hitting their ceilings. Receivers, who can break one or two tackles right after they catch the ball. Those are the types that can really, really make or break you and kind of help with that explosiveness. Again, we talked about the identity of Clemson, and it doesn't seem like Garrett Riley has a problem moving the ball through the air. And if Clemson continues to struggle a little bit in the run game, those yards after catch by extending the run game to a screen will be extremely important. And he could possibly use someone like Wembley in the screen game out to the side. Recruiting momentum also matters, and stability matters, and that's what Tyler Grisham is doing at the wide receiver position. While he's continuing to add another playmaker and continuing to show why his group of wide receivers are elite. If you think about it, what type of other player wants to be around a group of wide receivers that are elite? You could make the pitch for offensive line. You would definitely make the pitch for a quarterback. And that could be what Clemson is trying to do, not only for this season, but for 2027. Again, Wembley's going to be a freshman 2027, so we won't see him in next season. But this is all about the future for Clemson and continuing to reload and rebuild with playmakers on your group, on your team. The more that you can build out around losses that you may have, whether it be from the portal, graduation, or NFL, and from the wide receiver position, Grisham is doing good. He is building his group. He's got a great group already. But when you have that group, it's a double-edged sword because you know that you've got a good moment now of athletes to really jump off the screen on Saturdays. But you've also got to remember that those guys aren't going to be around forever. They're going to get poached by the NFL. They're going to get gone by graduation. And a lot of times you have to worry about nowadays tampering with other universities and through the transfer portal. Clemson is still building out the 2027 recruiting class right now. I'm not saying that they're a top class by any means, but Clemson has something that they are building upon, and that is continued structure at a really key position at wide receiver. A lot of things went wrong in 2025, but the wide receiver position was not one of those things. And you have to give a lot of credit to Tyler Grisham and his ability to kind of foresee what pieces he needs now, but also what he needs for the future. And that is a system that the staff and the offensive coordinator should be able to trust, but also that the head coach can trust and recruits around this group can trust. And stability does still matter in college football. In a world where everybody's getting dumped at the first sign of a bad season or a disappointing season, Clemson is trying to stay the course and not jump into the race of getting a new coach. I mean, look at Penn State right now. They have been struggling to find anybody, and as of today, they finally found someone in Matt Campbell, but they were so quick to dump their coach. And then they realized, wait a minute, we're not many people's first choice. And that was a big shock to them, I'm sure. All right, segment 3, we're going to talk about that national chaos and some concerns with the ACC, but why I'm not concerned with Clemson right here on Locked On Clemson. The holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every time. It's not just something you wrap, it's the way to share memories because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before gifting it. So when they plug it in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. You can give it to grandparents. You know they'll love it. My grandparents already have one. My daughter's grandparents already have one. My parents have one. Newlyweds, anyone who loves photos and who doesn't love photos. The people who don't love photos later on in life will decide that they really wish they would have taken photos back all those times that they had opportunities. Endless photos as well when you use the Aura app. It is really awesome. It's the holiday gift that will actually get used and not just thrown into the drawer. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com and get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code COLLEGE. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames will sell out fast, so order yours now to get in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Let's talk about the look around the country. But before we get into it, I want to let you know that you can always follow me over on X at The Morgan T Show. And in between episodes, you can always listen to other episodes if you missed anything over on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're still here in segment 3 and you're not one of those people that have followed or subscribed, you're just going to have to message me and say what's going on, like what's holding you back, because I'm here for you. Let's take a look around the country because what's happening nationally is wild. And in many ways, it helps Clemson out. First, Georgia Tech. This is a team that did beat Clemson this season, barely, but, they kind of controlled the game. And now they've lost their offensive coordinator. The stability that Clemson has in their program does matter, especially while your rivals, your opponents, are losing pieces that help them beat you. A team that got you earlier on the year now has to rebuild at a very important coaching position on offense, and that ultimately, in my opinion, helps Clemson. It doesn't help the ACC, but it does help Clemson. Now, let's look at Penn State. I mentioned that in segment 2 about how it's been crazy with Penn State. They dumped James Franklin. He almost immediately goes to Virginia Tech, which is another great program to build from, and not too far away from where he was before. So he still has that recruiting pipeline. Huge get for the ACC. Not that strong for Clemson. However, there is one piece of it that is strong. What's happening at Penn State could be a big deal because Matt Campbell is not what the players were saying they wanted. They wanted to hire an intern. No recruiting class is really enjoying what's going on at Penn State. Players are threatening to leave. Coaching search has been causing a lot of frustration up there. And here's why it matters for Clemson so much. Because Tom Allen is here at Clemson. Clemson has a lot of respect for Tom Allen. Tom Allen has been slowly building his defense the way he wants it. He's connected and in the upstate, and he's here to stay. And Clemson's defensive staff is getting rebuilt out as well. But Tom Allen, as he's building up, Penn State's, melting down. And that could push some of that talent Clemson's direction, maybe in the transfer portal, which we know Clemson is going to use more aggressively this season. Maybe there could be more talent coming Clemson way by way of Penn State. Players follow stability. Clemson has it. Penn State does not have it. And so that is where the advantage could be. When you look at Georgia Tech, Florida hired offense coordinator Buster Faulkner. That's a really strong move for them. Florida will be better offensively in the future because of that. But that's the type of hire that, you know, really helps Clemson when it comes to the ACC. But it's also still one that puts you on notice as well, because Clemson is not really trying to compete with Georgia State. They're trying to beat them, but they're trying to compete with the Floridas, with the Alabamas, with the Georgias, with the Ohio States. They're trying to get back to that. And so if this move actually does help Florida overall, and Clemson's still, spinning their wheels on offense, the Boo Birds are going to still be out there, and some changes are going to be needed to be made at the offensive coordinator position for Clemson. And another thing that I thought was interesting from this morning radio show with Mickey is there's a discussion about championship games and the cost of championship games. I like to go on ESPN and see what costs are, what the lowest entry price is. I like to go on Game Time, see what I can get into as far as getting into those games at the lowest possible price. You look at the championship games across the board, the ACC championship game is laughable, unbelievably low. Fans do not care about an ACC championship game with Virginia and Duke. And I hate to say that, but it's as much Virginia and Duke's fault and their fans' fault as it is Clemson's fault for not being in the championship game in the first place. They don't, the fans of the ACC do not care about the football championship like fans of the SEC or the Big Ten. The Big Ten game is at a price that's over $600. That tells you everything you need to know about where their attention is and where the national attention is, while ACC is sitting here with, would you guess, like $40. The ACC is a league where it's dominated by Clemson, Florida State, and Miami. Those are the teams that move the needle on the football side of things. If those teams aren't elite, which Miami's not in the championship game, they are, part of the tiebreaker problem. Florida State's just can't decide, what they're really doing over there. Clemson is what I would say under the spotlight on what kind of changes they're going to be made right now. But the conference itself, with Clemson, Florida State, Miami kind of struggling to get respect nationally, that causes a huge problem, and it's been around for years. Clemson cannot afford another bad season. The ACC can't afford another bad Clemson season. Even 7 wins with an ACC environment is bad. Even 8 wins with an ACC league is bad. Fans feel as if there's a disconnect in talent even in this year. If you can't show that your talent is better than the ACC, then the disconnect is much higher even outside of the conference. A 7-5 Clemson team is bad. An 8 and an 8 and a 7-6, an 8-5 rather, are bad seasons. There's no real postseason relevance for Clemson when they go when they have that record. Overall, does the brand take a hit? No, not if it's like once every now and then. But momentum stalls, and the college football playoff picture becomes a distant conversation of, will they ever make it back? You don't want to be in that discussion of, will they ever make it back? Clemson must get their offensive identity right, as we mentioned in segment 1. Clemson is still a team that can very easily next year be right back up in the top of the ACC. But they're just a few decisions away from not being there as well. Dominance in your conference is not guaranteed, but it must be protected and reinforced. And anything other than that must be flushed out. This offseason is a huge one for Clemson, and it could be the most important offseason in a decade. The good thing is Clemson's not rebuilding from the ground up. they are recalibrating. And that could be the difference between Clemson and many of these other teams out there that are going through a lot of instability and chaos. Thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs, Alex Dono, they break down the most interesting conference and college sports, from the rivalries to the championships to every game in between. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, Tiger fans, that's it for this week. We'll see you next week, and we'll see you at the top of the hill.